Well, so there you had some really important information about this event that we have. Remember that it's just in 2 weeks, so you are invited to check our website and our social networks because we are constantly sharing information about that, about the event. So I guess now we can start as well. So probably you are here because you want to, or you all come here to see and to listen to Professor Fran Giraldo, who is with us today. And he is going to be talking about his main research interest, which is assessment. Yeah, and the name of his talk is interfaces between task-based assessment and task-based instruction. So Professor Frank, I'm going to just share a little bit of information about him. He's a full-time professor and researcher at the Foreign Language Department of Universidad de Caldas in Manizales. And his main academic and research interest, as we know, is the interface between language assessment, literacy, and teachers' professional development. So welcome to this wonderful talk. We hope you enjoyed it. And Professor Frank, it's your turn.
Okay, hello everybody. Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar today. As you know, this is the name of the workshop, interfaces between task-based assessment and task-based instruction. How the two meet when we teach, when we allow our students to learn, and when we assess their language performance. For you to engage fully in this presentation, if you can, make sure you have a piece of paper next to you and a pen or a pencil. Or if you like to take notes digitally, then have a space where you can take notes. The PowerPoint presentation I will be using today is half done. I did one part and the other part will be done thanks to your contributions throughout the webinar. So in case you're interested in contacting me, if you have a question at the end of the webinar today that I cannot answer because of time constraints, you can definitely contact me through my email account. As Eliana was saying, I work at Universidad de Caldas, specifically in the Foreign Languages Department, where I teach courses in undergraduate programs, that's academic writing and language assessment, and in graduate programs, where I also teach academic writing for publication and language assessment. So that's why my main research interest is the interface, how teachers develop professionally when they learn about language assessment. So in case you need to contact me further, here is my contact information. I want to start the workshop today by making you feel really hungry. I know that at some point you probably have done this. You have been to a Subway to get a nice sandwich, or if not to a Subway, you have probably been to a restaurant where you can get a sandwich. So to start, I want to ask you this question. When you are going to get a sandwich, either from Subway or from another food venue, what language do you need to understand and produce in this context? To answer this question, you can use the chat. So Eliana will help me. So this is the first slide that is unfinished. It's going to be finished thanks to your contributions. So I'll start sharing all of my screen. Now you can see my slide and it's incomplete. So what language do you need in this particular context to understand and to produce? What do you hear? What do you say? So use the chat, or if you want, you can turn on your microphone and tell us. I'll be paying attention to the chat. So what kind of language do you need to produce here in this particular context? So Liana, if you see the answers, please let me know. Liana.
Sure, I'm checking here.
Okay.
Well, we have English in here.
English? I mean, okay. What in English, what do you say or what do you hear?
It says here, Mariana Restrepo is saying, maybe we need to understand the language of the menu and the options.
Okay, language in menu. Okay, so a little bit of reading. Good. Okay, so that's one. What else?
Thank you,
That's
Mariana.
right, Mariana, you're right. What else?
A request function.
Okay, requesting.
Jorge says language. Oh, sorry.
Uh-huh.
What he says
Requesting.
language about food, informal.
Okay, so informal vocabulary for food. Okay, what else?
Adriana Sanchez, language function.
Like what?
Information exchange, basic
Okay.
question.
Exchanging information and asking questions. Okay.
Okay,
What
they are
else?
Typing. We are waiting for more comments in here. Okay,
You
they are
ask
kind of
questions
shy.
in this particular contest, you ask questions. Okay, what else do we do here?
Man, we have many participants today.
Imagine you go to Subway or to another restaurant to get a sandwich. What do you say or what do you hear? I think there is another answer.
How to ask for food, says Daniela.
Okay, asking for food. Okay, so that's the function.
Mariana, it says we have to be clear about what we need.
Okay, so clarify what we want.
And Adriana says, I want to eat. I have preferences about it.
I like to eat or have. Okay, what else?
Estela says, oh, sorry. Estela says a specific vocabulary. Carolina, expressions that are not literal translations from Spanish, like can I have?
Okay, so specific vocabulary, that's one. Specific vocabulary. For example.
Well, there are no examples in here,
okay,
but there is one from...
What was the last one after specific vocabulary?
Carolina says expressions that are not literal translations for Spanish, like can I have?
Okay. Okay.
Greetings.
I have... Yes, of course, they greet you. Okay, so I think that's enough for now. Thank you, guys. This was wonderful. That's the idea, to work on this workshop by getting your answers. So when you go to get a sandwich, all of this happens and much more. So this is a real life activity for which we need to use language. So the first part, or the first central notion in the workshop today, is the meaning of a task. So there are many definitions of tasks in the literature, and I want to share one with you that is very simple, but it synthesizes the information from the literature. So a task is a real-life activity in which you use language to achieve an objective. In the previous task that we analyzed together, you definitely need to use language to get your sandwich. You cannot go there and just be mute and not do anything and get your sandwich, especially if you want a particular type of sandwich. So this is a task. Does it happen in real life? Yes, we ask for food. If you want to go to a Subway and eat a sandwich, this is something that happens in real life. Do you need language to participate in this real life activity? Of course you do. All of these things happen. All of these things you shared with us. And do you have an objective to achieve? Yes, getting that nice, delicious sandwich in your hand. So again, this is a central notion for the rest of the webinar today, the rest of the workshop. A task is a real-life activity in which you need language to achieve a particular objective. If you do not use language, it's very unlikely that you achieve your objective. Now, on a piece of paper, write down the numbers from 1 to 10. I'm going to show you a series of things, and if number 1 is a task, you put a tick, yes, or you put an X, no. If it is a task, or you write down yes. If it is not a task, you write down no. Keep that central notion in mind. Is this an activity that happens in real life? Do you need language to do this activity? Do you have an objective? So those 3 things to keep in mind. So I'll show you the list on that piece of paper. Write down the numbers from 1 to 10. Yes, if it's a task. No, if it's not a task. So here are the tasks. So first one is read newspapers to find out the best prices for a bike you need. The other one is write a paragraph in which you describe your home. The other one is, sorry, I just need to move something here. Talk to a friend about an exciting game you're playing on PS5. Number 4, a child describing how to do a subtraction problem. A cooking student getting ingredients ready for a recipe upon head chef's request. Write sentences describing what people are doing on some pictures. Turning a list of sentences from active voice to passive voice. Making plans with someone to go watch a movie. Finding out a good restaurant to take a relative who likes fast food. And making a list of verbs and writing down their past tense and past participles. So go ahead, take 1 minute or two to decide which of these are tasks, which of these are not tasks. Okay, everybody, time is up. What would you say? And you can use the chat feature to answer. What would you say about number one? Is this something you do in real life? Is it a task? Yes or no? Definitely yes. Okay, good. What about number two? Write a paragraph in which you describe your home. Yes or no? Number two. No, good. It's not a task. When in real life do you write a paragraph in which you describe your home? We need more context. Number two would be a task if you write an ad to publish in a newspaper. So number two, as it is not a task we do in real life. When do you describe your home? When you have the context for describing your home, for example, writing an ad for a newspaper, home for rent, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, big kitchen. Okay, now you have a task. But the way it is now, it's not a task. Number three, is that a task? Number three, yes or no? Jorge is saying yes. What about the rest of you? One message. Yes, we do this in real life. It's a conversational task and it happens. It happens. Wonderful. What about number four? Did you ever do this as a child? And even now, I talk to myself when I'm doing subtractions. So yes, it is. Number four is a task. Is this something that happens in real life? Yes, in real life, we subtract. Do you need language for that when you're describing? For example, I was talking to my daughter and she was describing that for me. Okay, so this is the number, this is what I'm deducing, or subtracting, sorry. So it is something that happens in the real life of a child. It's an academic task. Number five, so you want to be a chef and then you have a boss who's telling you what to do in the kitchen. So get me this, get me that. Is this something that happens in real life? Number five. Five, Jorge, thank you. Eliana Arcon, that yes, it's something that happens in real life in a very particular context.
Yes.
But it does happen. Number six, write sentences describing what people are doing on some pictures. What about number six? Some say yes, some say no. We need more context to make it a task. In some cases, maybe if you're showing pictures to somebody and you're talking about the pictures, oh yeah, here's my dad lifting me up when we were at the beach. Okay, in that case, you're describing what you're doing in the picture, but you don't write sentences to describe what people are doing in some pictures in real life. What would be the purpose for that? What would be the objective? Unless you're probably writing an email or something like that, so we need more context. Number 7, turning a list of sentences from active to passive voice. Definitely no. Okay, what about the rest of you? I can see the chat, okay? So I can see what's going on in the chat. No, it's a grammar activity, so it's not a task. It's not like you go around in real life listening to people. Oh, that's active voice. So here's the passive voice for your idea. No, we don't do that in real life. I mean, to achieve a particular communicative objective. Number 8, making plans with someone to go watch a movie. Yes, definitely a task. You need language. It happens in real life. There is an objective. Well done. Number 9, finding out a good restaurant. I mean, you want to take your friend? Number 9 is a task, yes. So you go to Google Maps, and Google Maps has information, reviews, photos, especially reviews, because you can see what other people have written. So you're interacting with language. Number 10, finally, number 10. No, definitely no. What type of activities is like vocabulary, conjugation? So it's more of a linguistic activity. Okay, so you got the idea of what a task is. So we're going to move on now, group, to the heart of the workshop today, interfaces between task-based assessment and task-based instruction. So the first interface, by the way, I didn't tell you at the beginning, you will be learning, I guess, learning about 2 interfaces. So the first interface is the tasks themselves are the driving force in a lesson, in a course, during a week, in a particular activity in class, for an entire year if you want. So the tasks are the ones that help you to teach and help students to learn. So in task-based instruction and assessment, the center of all that is a task. So here is an example of a task, is asking questions about groceries you need to get in a store. So you go to a store and then you start picking up groceries, and then all of a sudden you don't know where the cheese is. So you ask, oh, can you please tell me where the cheese is? Okay, what kind of cheese do you have? So this is something that happens in real life. In order to make the interface happen between task-based assessment and task-based instruction, the next step is thinking of assessment. So not thinking of lesson planning, teaching, and all that. No, start with the beginning. Let me be redundant. The beginning is the task, and next step, think about the end. Where do you want your students to get? So the next part is assessment. So for this particular task, I want my students to have a role play, and in the role play, this will be the criteria to be assessed. Question formation, where is the cheese, intonation. Oh, you don't have any cheese, sorry. Okay, or I'm sorry about that, or whatever. Reacting to information, that would be another example of that. Vocabulary related to groceries. So it's not vocabulary in isolation, but vocabulary to do a task. It's not question formation in isolation. Like, let's work on asking WH questions, but for what context? Asking questions about groceries. Okay, now we have context. Now the task makes much more sense for a student. When you do assessment through a task, the final question will be the one you see at the bottom. Can the students ask questions about groceries in a store? Can they do that? Do they have problems with grammar? Okay, fine, they have problems with grammar, but can they do that? Can they ask questions about groceries in a store? Once you have these 2 fundamentals, then teaching happens. So whatever happens in teaching will lead students and you towards task completion or task development. So if you're going to work on formation of questions asked in a store, then that's because that will allow you and your students to work on task development. If there is intonation for asking yes, no questions and WH questions and expressing surprise, oh, you don't have any milk? So that's for that particular context and task. The vocabulary that you need, it's not just random vocabulary, but it could be generic names like, typical vocabulary, apples, produce, meats, whatever. And also in this type of context, in real life, we use brand names like Kleenex, Pringles, Nusita, we use this vocabulary in real life too. So whatever happens here, group, teachers, in instruction, anything you do is to help students to do the task successfully. So one part could be, okay, you're going to have an assessment, a role play, and I'm going to assess how you do this task. Students, before that, let's have a lesson, one lesson in which you're going to have rehearsal and improvement. What did you do well? Okay, fine. Why did you do not so well? So you are assessing them formatively. You need to improve intonation. Okay, so improve it. Let's practice your intonation so that when you do the final assessment, the final performance, you will do a good job. By the way, this instruction that you see here, this thing you see here, anything can happen. These are just some examples I put here, but anything can happen provided that what you're doing and what your students are doing are helping them to do the task successfully, to learn how to do the task. So by the end, when they do the performance, they'll do a good job. Angie, yes, you can also apply an exit ticket asking them, okay, what did you learn about the speaking task that we did today? What is something that you need to remember when you are in a grocery store getting food? Okay, thank you, Angie, for your contribution. So this is an example of a productive skill, a speaking task. Now I'll show you an example of a receptive skill, which is reading. And in a reading task, so again, we think of the task itself. So reading a health article in the magazine. And then we think about the assessment itself. So in this case, the assessment is a test with multiple choice questions. Traditional test, fine, but here comes the big point about the interface between the task itself and the assessment through task performance. So first the task, second the assessment, third what you would do as a teacher to allow your students to be successful, to help them to be successful. So here are some examples. As I told you before, in instruction, anything can happen, provided that what you do allows your students to do the task. So one thing that you would do is familiarizing students with the format and content of health articles. What are some generalities that happen in a health article? So meaning they read health articles so they become aware of the genre. What does a health article include? Does it include statistics, for example? Okay, so that's something that happens. Another one, and I will be coming back to this point, asking realistic questions. I will be coming back to this in a minute. Asking realistic questions about information in health articles. That's the center of the task for a reading task. And this is something that may sound obvious to some of you, but it's something that we should always do, familiarize students with the format of a test. So if they're going to do multiple choice questions, familiarize your students with that particular format. Now, to come back to the issue of asking realistic questions, I'll show you an example. Let's suppose that you are going to read an article and the article is called the 5 Key Habits for Long-Term Health According to Science. Okay, so when you read a title like this, a need arises. Okay, I want to know what these 5 key habits for long-term health are. I want to learn about this. Now you have an objective, a task objective. And the language that you need is your reading comprehension and your vocabulary and all that to deal with the text. Here is the text. I mean, I took one part of this text and you will notice that the word premature is underlined. And this is because I want to explain the 2 sides. There is something called language-based questions. So this is an example of a language-based question. What is the best synonym for the word premature in the text? A, B, C, or D? This is not a task-based question. It's not going to give you information to say, my student can understand ideas from a health article, which is the question that you see at the bottom. So this is a language-based question. In fact, you can answer the question without reading the text. However, in real life, when we read text, we need to understand their ideas. So we need to develop task-based questions, questions that you would ask about an article in real life. So here are 2 examples. Why is exercise a fundamental aspect of good health? So this is something you would ask in real life, not like what is the best synonym of the word premature. And that doesn't mean that this question is wrong. No, this is okay for vocabulary as a skill, but not for task development. A task-based question is something like this or like this. What physical problems can be prevented through physical exercise? So this is something that you would genuinely want to know about reading a text that includes habits for good health, not the first question that you see there. At the end of, once you collect the information from a multiple choice test, the information should tell you, aha, my students can or can't, because they have problems, understand ideas from the text. But if you put a question like the one that you see there, language-based questions, it will tell you information about their vocabulary, their synonym skills, but not whether they can understand ideas and they do this in real life. So asking realistic task-based questions is central for reading or for listening. So now you guys have a turn. I'll show you a task, and on that piece of paper, you're going to think of what you would assess in a recipe. So your students are going to write a recipe. What would you assess? It's a recipe for a homemade dessert. What would you assess? So make a list of 3 or 4 criteria or aspects of writing that you would assess in a recipe. So go ahead, take 1 minute for that. And then I'll ask you, and Eliana will ask you to share your ideas so we can complement the slide. So go ahead, take 1 minute. What would you assess in writing for a recipe to make a homemade dessert?
Okay, we have some answers already here.
Oh, so fast? Okay, okay.
Yes.
Because I said, 1 minute for everybody, so let's give them some more time. That's great. Okay, so I'll be coming back to this. Okay, group. So let's work on this criteria. Eliana, can you still see my screen? So I don't know
Yes.
what I did.
Yes,
okay.
I can see.
So what are some language criteria for writing that would be necessary to assess writing here?
Okay, we have here how to say instructions, maybe use of imperatives.
Okay, imperatives for giving instructions. Good. What else?
There is skills to provide a sequence.
Okay, so writing, following a clear sequence. This would go in the criteria. What else?
Correct spelling.
Okay, correct spelling, of course. Yes, what else?
The linguistic elements they use to provide this sequence.
Okay, so
sequence
linguistic again. Markers of sequence. Okay, wonderful. What else?
Another comment that says sequence, clear instructions of the task.
Clear instructions, but you wouldn't assess that. You need to include that as a teacher, but you wouldn't assess the instructions that you give yourself. What would you assess in your students' writing skills? So these are good examples. What else is there?
If
Eliana?
they are, I guess, true or false, then is the info.
No, that was an answer I gave to one of the.
Yeah.
It's
okay, yeah, I just see your name. Sorry.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay, logical steps.
Okay, so logical steps. So that would be following a clear sequence, clear logical sequence. So meaning steps. Okay, anything else?
The audience it is intended for.
The audience it is intended for that goes in the task description, but not in the assessment criteria. Okay, what
Provide
else?
them a rubric in advance.
This
Well,
is
that's also
an
part
assessment
of
procedure, but it's not part of the assessment criteria. This is something you would do as a teacher, but it's not assessment criteria. Anything else? One last thing, Eliana.
Use of connectors.
Okay, use of connectors. I think we already have that in markers of sequence. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it like that. And this is more open. What would you do in class so students succeed in doing this task? Before they do the final recipe, what would you teach? What activities would you do? Put some examples in the chat. I'll include 3 of them and then we move on. What would you plan for your students to do the task successfully? What would be an, let's say, an obvious thing to do if they're going to write a recipe? Use the chat for your ideas, teachers.
Okay, we have one answer.
Yes.
I would teach them vocabulary about cooking.
Vocabulary related to cooking.
Explain the structure of the recipe.
Okay, okay. So explain the structure of a recipe. Okay, what else?
Give plenty of examples.
Okay.
Model.
Okay, models and examples of recipes. Let's leave it like that. Those are wonderful ideas, group. So just want to come back to the interface. First, we think of the task. Then we jump ahead and think of the assessment. When we think of the assessment, we define those aspects that we want to assess about the task. In this case, writing task. Once we have this clear, now we have a map. And then we go and teach. Anything in instruction that would help my students to do the task well. So yeah, definitely you need to teach vocabulary related to cooking, explain the structure of a recipe, models and examples of recipes, and all of the examples that you have included in the chat and that I'm sure people have had the chance to see. But the key question for the interface is this. Am I planning an activity for my students to do the task successfully? So that's the key question. For a listening task, and here is another task for all of you, you're going to listen to a person giving tips about how to have a healthy heart. So what you need to do as you're listening to this lady is write down, teachers, questions that you would ask your students, realistic questions about tips to have a healthy heart. So in the chat, I'm going to put the link to the video. So watch the video and write down 2 questions that you would ask your students about the information in the video. But it would be realistic questions that you would ask yourself in real life. So go ahead, these last 3 minutes, so take 4 minutes for you to create those questions, everybody. What questions would you ask about the information in the video? So go ahead and take a listen, and we'll come back in 4 minutes. Okay, everybody, let's see. What questions would you ask? What questions did you write down for your students based on the information in this video? You can type your questions in the chat. And Elena, please let me know, although I can also see the chat.
Sure.
So, because the idea is for me to write down those questions, examples of questions that the teachers make. They will be coming in soon. I'll give you an example of what not to do in task-based assessment and teaching. What adjectives did the person use? So that's a vocabulary-based question. So that's not a good question for task-based assessment. But a good question for task-based assessment would be, what did you write, teachers? Okay, how can you stop smoking? Did they talk about that? How you can stop smoking? Is that something that they say in the video? Ah, okay. So do you read? But you're asking questions to the person. No, you should be asking questions about, okay, for example, Jasmine. Okay, so the question Jasmine wrote here is about the information in the video. So I'll put it. Thank you, Jasmine. What are some ways to reduce the chance of suffering a heart attack? That is a question you would ask in real life. Do you think staying healthy is necessary? No. I mean, this question is important, but it's not a question that you can answer through the video. I'm thinking about, or I'm asking you guys about questions that you can answer by watching the video. Angie, what is the question? Ways to be healthy. So what is the question that you would ask your students, Angie Cruz? Okay, so Mariana, what are some things that you can do to improve your lifestyle? According to the video, okay? So according to the video, but your lifestyle, yes. So here are two examples of questions. So I'm coming back to my presentation group and let me explain why these are so important. So the listening task is listening to advice on heart health tips. So my students are going to do a listening task. And that's the topic, how to have a healthy heart. They listen to a person and they need to understand what the person is saying. At the end of the assessment or at the end of the activity, I, as a teacher, and my students should reach this conclusion. Can my students understand ideas from a video about heart health tips? Can they do that task? So the questions that I ask, and here are two realistic questions. What are some ways to reduce the chance of suffering a heart attack? How do they answer this question? By watching the video or listening to the information in the video. And the other one is, what are some things that you can do to improve your lifestyle? If the lady gives tips on how to improve your lifestyle, then that is a task-based question. The student will listen, hear, and be able to answer this question. I think there are some more in the... What type of diet do we need to be healthy? Okay, so remember, the question should be about specific information or general information in the video. A question like the ones that you included in the chat, like, do you think staying healthy is necessary? That question is for a speaking activity. I mean, it's not wrong, but it's not task-based for a listening task. Eliana, do you want to say something?
Yeah, we have one more. It says, which of the 5 tips would you practice right away?
But that would be after the listening. Remember that this is a listening task.
And from the video,
that would be an extension. It's a great idea.
Yes, and we have Eliana? One more from the video, which is the most difficult for you to achieve.
That is an opinion after you understand the information in the video. What are the 3 advices given to keep a healthy lifestyle? Okay, so that's another example. I'll actually put it here. So we reached the magic number 3. I'll include it here. What are the 3? Okay, so 3 pieces of advice given to keep a healthy lifestyle or a healthy life. So that's it. Those questions can be answered by listening to the information in the video, because the task-based question at the end says, can the students understand ideas from a video? We are in a listening task. So we think of the task, we think of the assessment, in this case, questions, and then we create questions that are realistic. Realistic questions you would ask in real life when you are listening. How much time do you need to exercise daily? Okay, thank you. I'm gonna move on to the next interface, the second and last interface in the workshop today. The last interface is related to interface number one, and this one is called describing constructs. I know it sounds a little technical. A construct is the particular skill that you assess through an assessment instrument or an assessment procedure. The particular skill you assess. So if you have a speaking assessment, we don't say that we assess speaking. We assess something particular about speaking. If we give our students a reading comprehension test, we are not assessing reading comprehension. We are assessing one particular aspect of reading comprehension. Understanding pronoun references, understanding conclusions. Okay, now we have a construct. So a construct is a particular skill that you assess and that you show when you are being assessed. So a listening task, your students are going to hear a conversation, and in this conversation, they need to activate a lot of listening skills. What happens in their brain when they are listening? So that's what's called the cognitive view of describing a construct. When you are listening, what happens in your brain? So you guys are going to hear a very simple conversation. It's for level A2. And what you're going to do is make a list of the listening skills that you or any student would need to understand the conversation. I'll give you two examples. The first example, in the conversation, the salesperson says, "How can I help you?" So a listening skill that we use in real life is when we go to a store, they will ask you, "Oh, welcome to whatever store. How can I help you?" And your brain processes that immediately. She's asking me about something I need. So that is a micro skill that happens in your brain. So identifying polite expressions to provide help, meaning the salesperson, and the salesperson would ask something like this: "Is that all?" And that's something you need to understand when they tell you, "Is that all?" So that's an expression that you also need to understand. Another example. No, that's the only example. So this is a particular listening skill that happens in our brain when we are listening to someone giving us information in a store. So the task for you is, what listening skills do we, or does a student need to understand the information in the recording? And make a list of as many as you can as you are listening to the recording, okay? So I will share this link with you in the chat. You listen. And don't make a list of topics like, for example, vocabulary. No. What is the listening skill? Understanding what? So in the chat, you can see the link. I think this is like 2 minutes. So once you're done, we will come back to this and complete this slide with cognitive skills. What happens in your brain as you listen? The link is already in the chat. So go ahead and listen. Okay, everybody, what will be the skills that are necessary to understand the information in the recording? Okay, so Judith, thank you. So Elena, can you read? Because I'm typing
Sure,
here.
yes.
Understanding what?
Ways to ask for information about clothes, size, color.
Ask for info about clothes, for example, size and color. Okay, what else do students need to understand? Great. Jorge wrote payment method. So understanding payment
Okay, with
methods.
cash or credit card, yes.
Or questions about payment methods. Okay.
Listening for details.
Okay, yes, of course. Listening for details will be an example of a detail. That's a listening skill, definitely.
Accepting or refusing.
Okay. So identifying would be the listening skill. Accepting or refusing is a productive skill, but identifying how people accept or refuse something. That's the listening skill. Great.
And
what are some
identifying requests from the seller.
Find requests from a seller. Okay. So group. These are skills in listening that are necessary to understand a conversation, the conversation that you heard. So when we plan a listening task, we think of those particular skills that we want to assess. So that's the concept specification in task-based assessment. What are some realistic skills that people use when they are listening? So if you hear a conversation like the one you just heard, what happens in your brain from the point of view of listening? Here comes another example that we're gonna make together. Think of you are in another city and you're a tourist, you need to go somewhere. What speaking skills do you need to show when you are in this particular context? What will be some examples of speaking skills? Think of the process. So you are the person, you are this guy, you are these people, and then you need to ask someone about directions. What would be the first thing to do from the speaking point of view? You see a stranger, and then you need to ask them about directions. What would you do through speaking first? Think of functions, language functions.
We have an answer.
Yes.
Politeness before asking.
Okay, so you need to use expressions to be polite.
I will greet first. So
greet.
Greetings.
Okay, greeting. Okay.
Using language to approach a stranger.
Okay, like what?
We don't have an example, like, excuse me. Asking for a specific information.
Yes.
Language courtesy codes.
For example.
Grading language according to context.
Grading or greeting?
Grading.
I don't see the chat.
Grading language according to context.
What do you mean by grading? CE.
I guess it's like to use the appropriate one.
Okay, so
according to the context.
Okay, using appropriate language for context. What else would you say in this particular task? Think of you doing this task in real life. What do you do through speaking? One more. These are all great ideas. These are all things that happen when you ask for directions in real life. Negotiating options, Ariana, thank you. So, negotiating options. So, these are things that happen. Colors, prices, Oh, Adriana, you were talking about the previous task. No, this one is about speaking, asking for directions. That's about the previous task in listening. So, group, to come back to this. No specific vocabulary when asking for directions. Okay. So I'll put that one. Using vocabulary related to directions. Can you tell me where I can find the Museum of Modern Art? So, group. Planning a speaking task for assessment involves knowing what particular skills of speaking you want to assess in the task. When you have a speaking task, you don't assess speaking. You assess the particular things that you see here in this list. So those are the constructs, the particular skills you assess through a task. So to summarize the workshop today, so you get these takeaway points. Tasks are real-life activities. We definitely need to use language for a particular purpose, like asking for directions, like understanding when somebody talks to you in a store, etc., etc. We can use tasks for teaching, learning, and assessment because they are the driving force for a lesson, for a course, for the entire year, for a month. It's your planning. When you do task-based assessment, the final question is, can my students do this task in real life? Even if they make language mistakes, even if they forgot about a little something, but in general terms, can they do the task? And for task-based assessment and teaching, there were two interfaces that we covered today. First, the centrality of tasks. The activities you do in class are geared towards the task. And number two, constructs need to be defined well, like what we did here. These are all constructs. You need to define them before students do the task. So to show you a visual, tasks are central, you plan them, then there is learning going on, students learn to do the task, and then you assess their performance. So tasks are the central aspect. When you're going to assess, you need to describe what particular skills you wanna check in the task. So you define them when you're planning the task. You help your students to develop the skills to be successful in the task, and then the students show that they have the skills when they do the task performance. So these are the interfaces. This is the heart of the workshop today. I think I have a couple of minutes to show you where to get ideas for tasks. So please let me know if you can still see my screen. ¿Alguien tiene micrófono prendido? Can you still see my screen, everybody?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you want to get ideas for tasks, this is a first resource. It's called the Canadian Language Benchmarks. So they have a skill, understanding expressions, blah, blah, blah. And then they have sample tasks. So they have wonderful tasks that go from very low level to high level. For example, these are for listening, and these are for speaking. So they have the descriptor, like the skill itself, and then there are sample tasks. So this is for speaking, very low level. So I'll show you, okay, sorry about that, I'll show you again. Look at this one, for example. This one is very, very cool. Okay, so for example, this one over here, give polite, positive or negative instructions or commands to a friend, co-worker, sales clerk, or classmate. What are the plans? Okay, come to my house. Please don't do that. So there are examples of tasks that you can find here. Many, really, many of them. That's one, the Canadian Language Benchmarks. The other one is a wonderful resource that is online. It's called the Global Scale of English. This is probably one of the best I've seen out there. What they did here with the Global Scale of English was to take the descriptors from the Common European Framework and make them much more specific. So here you can choose something called learning objectives. For example, let's choose a learner, young learners. Let's choose a skill, listen. And after you choose, you want to go for, you use this ruler, let's say, to calibrate the level. Okay, so young learners in listening, and I want only A1. Okay, show results. And this gives you ideas of constructs, particular skills that you can use in an assessment. For example, can understand basic action words, clap, stamp, jump, blah, blah, blah. For very low level learners, can understand the main information when people introduce themselves, name, age, where they are from. These are all constructs, particular skills we teach and we assess, but they are task-based. That's why it says, understand the main information when people introduce themselves. Understanding when a person introduces themselves is a task. So, thank you for your participation. Eliana, do we have time for questions? Because I know that is 1 hour of the workshop, but I don't know if we have time for questions.
Yes, I guess we can spend a couple of minutes.
Okay, so what questions do you have for me, audience?
Well, so far they are asking for the links that you were presenting.
Okay, sorry about that. So this is what I'm going to do. I will upload my slides. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna save this. So you can get all of the information that you created, you participated. This is your product. So I'm going to give you a link to access the PowerPoint, and you will have all of the information there. So can anybody please confirm if you can have access to the Google Drive? It's a folder. So let me know if you have access to the slides in that folder.
Yes, we have.
Yes.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much. And this is how I end the workshop. Your questions.
Well, apparently there are no, well, in the chat, there are no questions. I don't know if any of the participants want to ask something.
Oh, I'm more than open to answering your questions. If not, it was my pleasure to be here. Thank you for participating.
They are saying thank you here in the chat.
Yes, I see that.
Had to go before earlier,
Sure.
but they are all saying thank you, interesting and useful. Thank you so much.
And it was something that we co-created. So keep that in mind, teachers. Okay, it was my pleasure.
Yeah. And insightful, it was great. Thank you, thanks. Okay.
Thank all of you.
Well, I guess then we can finish our session. Of course, it was really insightful as the comments said, and really useful for our teaching practices as well. So we would like to thank you, Frank, for being in here and for sharing this with us, and to, of course, to take all the contributions that the teachers also made. So thank you very much. And remember that we have another event next week, which is the meet and greet session that is in for the HOW celebration. Remember that is the anniversary of HOW Journal. So we have a meet and greet session with 2 participants, with 2 of the authors of the journal. So thank you very much for attending, and see you in our next webinar and our next event. Bye-bye.